All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Author Story. I'm Alexander Lim, your host, and for this episode, I'm interviewing Sylvia Martinez, author of the book Invent to Learn, Making, Tinkering, and Engineering the Classroom. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now and check out the Amazon link in the video description below and check out Sylvia's book, Invent to Learn, right now. So, Sylvia, welcome to Author Story. It's great to have you as our guest.
Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Oh, cool, cool. So, Sylvia, please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little about your story and your book. What's your background?
Actually, my background is as an electrical engineer, and I have a co-author. My co-author's name is Gary Stager, and Gary Stager has been teaching teachers about robotics and computing and programming, and teaching everyone from kindergartners to graduate students to program computers for about 30 years. So together we decided that this new thing called the maker movement would be a really interesting thing for teachers to understand. And if you haven't heard of the maker movement, it's this global revolution that's happening right now. That there are maker fairs going on. There are people using things like 3D printers to shortcut the design process and create things on their own. All over the world, people are creating solutions, sharing solutions with others, taking their problems and taking them into their own hands.
Right.
Everything from prosthetics, you can 3D print prosthetic devices, and people who can't afford them can have them for a lot less money. People are making like moisture sensors. Farmers in Africa who can't afford to wait for a big company or a university grant, they can go online and make their own. And by the way, some of places like Africa are leapfrogging some of the developed world in their ability to connect and get online. Right. So, these kinds of solutions are being, it's like a DIY community. It's people taking their own, they're solving the problems and taking their own lives into their own hands. And this is happening in a rush that we're just not even ready for.
Right.
I think, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but it wasn't that many years ago that having a printer on your desktop was kind of like rare. Right, and now everyone has one. Well, in the next decade, I think a lot of us are going to have 3D printers on our desktop and make things, simple things that, we can, instead of buying a product from Amazon and having it shipped to us, we can buy a design from Amazon and print it out ourselves. Wow. Small items, watches, all kinds of small devices. So anyway, this maker movement is giving people the ability to solve their own problems and make things very quickly and at very low cost. And that really ties into the way we want kids to learn, to tackle their own problems, to make things that really work, to be in the real world and be scientists, not to learn about science. And so we decided to write this book to build a bridge between these two communities, because a lot of teachers have never heard of the maker movement. And a lot of people in the maker movement don't really think that schools are very up-to-date modern places. Okay. So, we wanted to make sure that, that we connected these communities.
Okay, right. Okay, cool. Got that. So you mentioned you're an engineer, but you also have a degree in education. Is this correct?
Correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, ask the question. Sorry.
No, I was just wondering, how did you get into education? I mean, usually engineers, from what I understand, not many of them go into education and are interested in educating for for education's sake.
Well, actually, I've met a lot of engineers who really find it very fulfilling to work with kids.
Okay.
Both formally and informally. So in my own case, I worked in aerospace for about a decade. And then, I live in Southern California, so there's a lot of artistic industry here. I got involved with video game development and worked in programming educational games, software, different kinds of video console games. And I found that I really liked and was interested in the concept of how people learn. So I went back to school and got a degree in education. Okay. And started, working more with schools and finding out that kids really weren't getting the kinds of experiences that I got when I was growing up, very hands-on, very real world. And, there was a lot of test preparation and very abstract concepts. And so I wanted to work on things where I brought, real authentic technology to schools, help teachers see that they didn't have to be the fount of all knowledge, that having kids figure stuff out was the real learning experience. And, figuring out ways for those kinds of things to happen. So, then a couple years ago, we decided to write this book and kind of hit this new wave of this maker movement. And I think a lot of teachers are really ready to turn schools around and make them places where kids do real things once more.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely different from like rote and read and write and arithmetic kind of system. I mean, getting the kids involved.
Yeah, there's some, there's a lot of feelings that people have about school based on their own experiences as students. And, sometimes even people who didn't get a good education, who learned to hate math, when they have kids, they demand exactly the same thing that didn't serve them very well. So I think part of my job now is to find and promote stories that show that kids can do things, real things, and learn math in context, learn science from real experiments using real tools, and that's real. That's where real learning happens. To give people something else, another touchstone, another example of how learning really happens.
Right. Okay, got that. So the maker movement and teaching kids this new way of this new way of education. What are the main tools of this? I mean, is it still like pen and paper? I take it computers are involved.
I very much think that computers are one of the key parts of bringing the maker movement to schools. We can say, well, kids will build a castle out of cardboard, and that's very creative, and that's a good thing. I mean, we want kids to have creative experiences, real hands-on experiences, but I think the computer brings something to the table that's unique in history. I mean, obviously, computational ability. Using software to design something, meaning you can create a design and then go back and do it again, which all engineers in real jobs use what they call an iterative design methodology, meaning they don't just do it once. They, design something, and then in the computer, they have the ability to tweak it, to revise it, to try it in simulation, and to keep working on it until it gets better and better and better. And by bringing those kinds of experiences to school, we can give kids the opportunity to do the same thing. Everyone talks about real world job experience. Well, in the real world, everybody's using a computer. From historians trying to comprehend big data to artists, to musicians, storytellers. Everyone is using technology, and technology is kind of like something that can be anything. It's almost like a chameleon. You want it to play music, it plays music. You want it to calculate numbers, it calculates numbers. So by giving kids these baseline experiences with computers in school, we really set them up for the real world.
Okay, I got that. Now, the maker movement and making in general, how different is it from, say, going to, say, wood shop or metal shop and creating something with a lathe and a mill and stuff like that? How is there any difference, or is it the same thing?
Well, I think in some cases, having more of a computer component to it is different. A lot of these new tools are very inexpensive, very easy to use, and because of that, the good part is that you can reintegrate those great vocational experiences, those great hands-on experiences into academic classes. It's in the past couple of decades, school has been kind of split into two roads. And kids either go down the career path and they get to take shop classes, or they go down an academic path, and they often have very few hands-on experiences. But that's not the way the real world works. The real world, engineers have to use lathes, and artists have to use computers, and all of this integrates. So I think we kind of did something in schools decades ago that has not really served our children well. And that's something that I'm hoping changes, and that's one of the reasons I do what I do.
Okay, cool. Sylvia, now we've been talking about lathes and computers and stuff like that, and this might come across to quite a few people as a bit vague. Can you give us sort of like a case study of an example of how a kid would go about making stuff within this maker movement?
Sure. I think one of the most popular and one of the most well-known kind of symbols of the maker movement in classrooms is the 3D printer. So have you seen a 3D printer?
Yes, I have. Not personally, but on video, yes, I have.
So these are very, very cool tools. It's a little machine that builds things in 3 dimensions, kind of by laying layer by layer after layer of plastic that gets melted, sort of like if you took a glue gun and kept going back and forth, or building something out of Lego blocks, only teeny tiny melted Lego blocks. But the power of the 3D printer is that the design software allows students, or allows anyone, to design something and then print it out. And then so you can make, say, for example, you could make a tool that you needed. You could make, replace a broken bracket on something, in which case you would have to measure. You'd have to use calipers and measure what you needed, print it out, see if it worked. So you're incorporating this iterative design process plus mathematics, precision, analysis, measurement, all these kinds of mathematical entities that many times kids find very abstract. They become real. So you're making mathematics real. You're doing something in the real world. You can make things that people really need. For example, there's a website called Enable the Future, where people sign up who need prosthetic devices, and then classrooms or scout troops who have access to a 3D printer can make the prosthetic device, and you ship it across the country. And these are amazing connections and real needs. And the kids who are building these devices have to measure and be precise and understand levers and all of these physical science concepts, and they're making something that someone really needs, that they could never afford otherwise.
Right. And I suppose these things do work. I mean, even if they're made of plastic, like a prosthetic made this week should last a long time, correct?
Oh, correct. And they're much less expensive, and they take a lot shorter time to make. So something, for example, if you have a toddler, an 18-month-old who needs like a brace to help them lift their arms, that maybe they have a muscle, weakness or something, making that by hand would cost tens, maybe more, tens of thousands of dollars, and take months for a master technician to make. Well, what happens to an 18-month-old? Using 3D printing, you can measure, even scan their arms or whatever you need, and then make it overnight for $1, and then next week when you need a new one, you make a new one.
Yeah, especially like 6 months down the road when the kid's 2 years old, bigger, needs a different prosthetic.
That's right.
Cool, that's fantastic.
That's right.
All right.
So kids are doing this. This is happening.
Okay, that's fantastic. What I'm getting from this is that this is this is like a total new approach, because I remember like in the way that I was brought up, there's like a divide between art and science in education, but it seems that there's a merging of these two going on right now.
There definitely is. I think that was a very artificial divide. The way that school separates subjects is only done for efficiency's sake, is only done as an administrative help. It's not the way people really learn, and it's certainly not the way that the jobs in the real world work. When you have ownership, when you care about what you're working on, even a scientific experiment, you add your own aesthetics. The artistic element is not separate from the urge to make something.
Right.
In fact, it's very integrated. I think that artists also understand things like mindfulness and craftsmanship that we sort of don't give kids time to develop when they're working with math and science concepts. But really, programming a computer or thinking hard about a problem is a very artistic process. It's not like, well, step one, step two, step three.
Right.
Scientists like sleep on it and have a cup of tea and talk to each other. And that's how real science is done.
Right.
And yet in school, we kind of have this artificial construct of, the scientific method and the step-by-step process. And
right.
those, I think we need to loosen up a little bit and help kids see that science can be wonderfully creative and that art can have a basis in real world science.
Nice, cool. So, Sylvia, would you have any numbers on how widespread this is among the schools? I mean, I got that this movement's probably occurring nationwide, but how widespread exactly is it?
Well, I think it's not just nationwide; it's global.
Okay.
Gary, my co-author, and I, we've been traveling the world. In the last 6 months, we've been to the Netherlands, we've been to Italy. Gary just got back from India. There's just a lot of people looking at this as a really exciting new way to get kids hooked on science and owning their own learning. Nationwide, numbers are tough because, I think everyone's doing it because people who call me up and talk to me, because it's a book, well, so everyone, as far as I'm concerned, this is 100% of the people I talk to are interested in this.
Okay.
Now, obviously, that's a terrible, terrible, way to do statistics, but I know that there are some very, very active like Google groups online where educators are talking about this. Our professional development sessions sell out. We have a summer institute every year called Constructing Modern Knowledge that, is probably going to sell out really soon once again.
Okay.
So, people are actively looking for ways to make school relevant and meaningful for kids. And I think that the maker movement is offering something that's really vibrant, has a lot of interesting paths you can take. If you don't like 3D printing, you can try physical computing. If you don't like robotics, you can try wearable technology like sewing computers into clothes. If you don't like that, you can do programming projects. There's so much that attracts different kinds of kids with different interests and abilities, and there's so much out there that I think is really, really new and fun.
Okay, cool. Well, it certainly sounds like a very exciting time right now.
It definitely is, and I think it's much needed in schools. A lot of people are worried about how many tests that children are taking these days, and how much time is spent preparing for tests. And these tests don't really show what kids know. They catch kids at what they don't know, but for a lot of kids, they're not good indicators, and yet we're putting more and more emphasis on them. And so to change schools, I think we can't just say tests are bad and throw up our hands. We have to show what's good. We have to show what's better. And to me, these kinds of new technologies really offer a different, creative, exciting solution that stands in stark contrast to testing.
Right. Okay. All right. So you mentioned, some of the exciting things that the maker movement can give to society as a whole. But for the kids who actually practice this, what do you think are the possible future consequences for them? How will this help them out in the future when they become adults, when they work? How will this help them out?
Well, it's not just me saying this. There are a number of research institutions that are studying exactly that question, including Harvard. And how you can't get much much better than that. The Harvard Graduate School of Education has a project called Agency by Design, which is looking into what they call maker empowerment. What does it mean? And what they're finding is that kids who have these experiences feel that they can solve problems, that their problem solving capacity, their attitude about themselves is enhanced, and that translates, that they can say to themselves, well, I did this, now I can do something, more complicated. The Stanford Graduate School of Education has a transformative learning technologies lab that's doing amazing research showing that kids need the time to mess around with tools and materials and big ideas. You can't just force learning onto kids. You can't deliver learning to kids. And, it's hard to get schools to sort of back off because we've really tasked schools with doing nearly the impossible. You're gonna learn all of history, in 18 weeks. And, here, fact. Well, the kids don't get it, and then we complain because they don't know the date of, the Battle of, Gettysburg or something like that. Well, what they should be learning is how history is a connected series of events. They should be going deeper into, things that tell a story that they can get excited and interested in. And we don't give kids time to do that. So, I'm talking about a lot of things here, including changing the curriculum that we've kind of become used to. We're teaching the same math we've taught for the, geometry is centuries old. We're teaching 300-year-old math, and yet the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics a couple of years ago said that 50% of all mathematics has been invented since World War II. And that hasn't changed. Math in school has not changed. Not only since World War II, but hundreds of years before that, we're teaching the kids the same things. And so I think we have to take a hard look, and that's difficult. Nobody likes change. Nobody likes to, to be the one who says, let's not teach this, let's teach this instead. And then, everyone says, well, wait, you can't do that. And then all of a sudden you're stuck with the same gigantic textbook, and you never make it all the way through.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I got that. Okay, cool. So, Sylvia, authors, when they write nonfiction books, they sometimes go on a journey as they do so. Like, it could be personal, it could be professional. They start off thinking one thing, at the end of the book, they wind up thinking another way about something. So, has working on this book done that for you?
What a great question. I really think so. I really enjoyed going back and rereading some of the books that changed my mind about things 10, 20 years ago, and rereading and really thinking through some of the things that, you don't remember things that you read so long ago, and yet I'd still sort of carried some of those impressions, and going back to the source, to the, to these really giants of education like John Dewey and Seymour Papert and Piaget, it made me even more convinced that the book that Gary and I were writing was important and, would help teachers make these connections, because really what I'm talking about is not new. The technology may be new, but the concepts are old. John Dewey at the turn of the century said that kids should learn from experience. Piaget, who's like, Freud, sort of like his Freud is to psychology, Piaget is to education, said that knowledge is a consequence of experience. He talked extensively about hands-on learning. And yet we've forgotten these things. So, I wanted to help teachers understand that this wasn't a new thing, that this is the way we know kids learn, by having long periods of time to really get deeply into something that interests them, and that it can happen in today's classroom.
All right, cool. Okay, got that. So, Sylvia, let's say you met up with someone who's totally unaware of, the maker movement, inventing, the present work to integrate art and science. And you had only time to tell him or her one thing, the most important thing about all this that's going on right now. What is that one thing that you would tell that person?
The elevator pitch.
Okay, go ahead. Shoot.
Yeah, I think that learning is about experiencing something firsthand, and that we can give kids the opportunity to be today, not to learn about something they might be in the future, that they can be scientists, they can be mathematicians, be historians, be paleontologists, be artists, be engineers today, that kids have the capacity to do amazing things, especially with these new tools and technologies from the maker movement.
Cool. That's a great elevator pitch right there. It's fantastic. Okay, so Sylvia, is there anything else? Sorry, other stories or topics that you might want to explore as an author in the future? Maybe a follow up to this book or something like that.
Well, a couple of things that we're working on is, first of all, we've started publishing other people's books. So when you go to Invent to Learn, you can also go to inventtolearn.com. You can also go to our publishing website, CMK Press. We call it Constructing Modern Knowledge Press. So cmkpress.com has other books that also reinforce this idea. Some are specific, how to use 3D printers in the classroom. Some are more about leadership. So, we want to provide an avenue for teachers, for other educators, for other people to share these powerful ideas. Personally, I'm starting a journey towards what I hope is my next book. You never know,
Okay, yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about girls and science and technology education.
Right.
Because a lot of women are not represented well in the engineering professions. In fact, it's not even as good as when I was an engineer. I think that some of the numbers have even gone down. There was a time when they were going up, but in the 1980s, they started going down again. Especially in things like computer science and engineering. So when you work back towards what needs to happen in elementary school, how do you keep girls interested in science? Because they are interested in science, but it falls off as they get older. So how do you keep them interested in science? What kinds of experiences have to happen? What do teachers need to do? Just so a lot of I'm doing a lot of the research now. I'm kind of collecting a lot of stories, and I'm kind of waiting for the for the book to kind of coalesce out of the clouds.
Okay, all right, okay, cool. Well, here's to hoping that book does take place, because it sounds like a very interesting topic.
Oh, I hope so.
Okay, cool. So, in closing, the book is Invent to Learn, Making, Tinkering, and Engineering in the Classroom. The author's our guest, Sylvia Martinez. And you can check out her book at her website, inventtolearn.com. It's also on Amazon. And also, as she mentioned, please check out cmkpress.com for other books related to this topic. So, Sylvia, thank you very much for your time and for being an author story. It was, I must say, a very interesting session for me, and I'm sure our listeners have picked up quite a few things about this ongoing trend in education.
Well, thanks, Alex. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so, to our listeners, if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, just click the subscribe button. And if you'd like, you can buy the book right now by going to the Amazon link in the video description. So that's all, folks. So long for now, everyone. I'll be back next time on Author Story with another inspiring